Hello everyone, Eric here, and we are going to be talking about the mix for No One Lives Forever. This is a rather informal rundown. I'm sure I'm going to gloss over some stuff, but it's Sunday morning, and we are doing this just for kicks. So if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. All right, first off, let's talk about the project setup here. By the way, this is going to be rambling. I'm going to be bouncing over, but I'll be putting timestamps in the video description. So this is Reaper. This is Reaper version 6. I'm still a bit behind the current one. But I tend to set up my stuff as organized as I can. We have folders over on the left. First one is auxiliary sends. That's going to have stuff like our glue compression and our glue reverb. We have another folder for all of the drums. Another folder for Dan, our bassist. Another encompassing all of the rhythm guitars. Here's one for all the leads. This is miscellaneous stuff. And here are all of our vocals. And then this is a separate folder. I was doing some processing on the vocals before I actually bounced and mixed them in. So let's start with the drums here. Let's take a look at this. So what we have is we have the drum bus, and then in there we have two folders. We have drum auxiliary and drum mics. Drum mics have all of the drum mics. This was a live kit recorded by our drummer Adam in his house. In fact, in the video, that performance, he is recording the audio and the video at the same time. That performance is what you're hearing in the song, so you can see his setup over there, what his room's like and stuff. All of the mics that he recorded and gave me are in here, and I've also separated them out into folders for kick, snare, toms, overheads, and then we have another one called knee mic. And I also have some triggering going on. So, and in the auxiliary, sometimes I put other stuff in here. Right now we just have a drum room. So let's turn that off for now. Let's turn off everything that's on the master folder there, and we're just going to be looking at kick stuff first. So we have two tracks. We have the kick and the kick trigger. We'll turn off the trigger for a bit. The kick here, we have two different takes, and I actually have this locked right now, so I don't actually accidentally switch it. But we have the original drum recording here, the kick drum. Let me make sure we're just doing that. There we go. Very quiet. But you see what we're looking at there. And I do an initial round of processing on this stuff. First off, since I have the bounced and the original version on the same track here, and they're just two different takes, I've turned off all of the effects that I did initially. So we'll turn off what I did afterwards and just look at these initial ones here. So first off, we have just a little gain utility plugin. We're bumping up the signal by 6 decibel. Here we go. There we go. Then I'm using Oxford drum gate here to isolate out the kick notes from whatever else is bleeding through. And this has the capacity to do leveling on its own, but I'm not using it for that. Then what I've got running here is a gate, and you'll see this is a very quick gate. It opens 9 milliseconds early, it's got a 5 millisecond attack time, and then it has no hold time and releases in 9 milliseconds. So all this is doing is just chopping off some of the tail of the kick. So this is before. I'll turn it up a bit here. And after. Subtle, but important. And turn the volume back down. Now, for leveling, I'm using this guy from Black Salt Audio, Sound Radix, excuse me. Too many plugins, and this isn't completely, making every drum hit sound the same, but it's tightening them up a bit. And then, once all that was in place, I bounced it to a new take, and then I have some EQ going on. And this is before and after. So what we're doing is we're clearing out the super low end, we're taming that first harmonic that's coming out, removing some mud and stuff from the middle, and enhancing the click. And then what we have is a secondary track that's running a trigger. And I don't have the trigger cooked in here. I thought I had the settings in this project. Oh, well, they are in another project, but all it is running slate trigger to find a sample that sounds similar-ish to the original. That's the original process kick, and here's the trigger. Important to add is that that has a bit of room sound cooked into it too. So the two kicks together sound like that. And then for the full folder kick processing, we're doing a few things. This is another round of Pro Q just to do a bit of evening out, adjust a few things. And then we're running transgressor here. This is a transient shaper. And basically what you can do is dial in where the transient is on a track. And then you can EQ that separately from the sustain and change the levels and stuff. So basically what this is doing is removing a lot of low end out of the tail and making the initial attack sharper, a bit heavier, and just more pronounced. So without and with. All that tail stuff really can clutter up metal mixes. Then we're running another round of Pro Q. This is done separately from this one because I believe I did this later in the process. I generally work up a good rough mix with everything and then go through and fine tune it more in context. So without and with. And then just because we needed a bit more oomph to it, we're using our bass mono here by Waves. Just gives it a bit more punch. So that's the kick. Moving on to the snare. It's a similar process. As you can see on the actual snare track here, we had a similar thing going on where we had an instance of Pro Q and Oxford drum gate on the front end. And I'm not using the leveler there either. And then I bounce that to a second take and then do my actual mixing. And what we've got here is a gate, Pro Q, and snare buzz, which adds, this is a Waves Factory plugin that adds some sizzle to it. So going back to the beginning, let's unlock this. And this is the original snare sound that I got from Adam. Probably help if I turn off all this other shit. There we go. So yeah, it's a snare. And with the Pro Q and drum gate, and all Pro Q is doing on the front end is just clearing out the low end. I didn't want the kick bleeding through to impact the gate. So once all that's processed, we bounce it in place. And then we have some other stuff going on. The gate here, I think this was just here to catch some errant stuff that had been coming through from Oxford drum gate. Pro Q, once again, we're clearing out the low end. We are reducing the first harmonic and we're giving it a bit more crack. Good. And now adding snare buzz, we'll just give it a bit more sizzle. I didn't have a top and bottom snare mic for this, so that's part of the reason why we're doing that. Now, I ran that through two instances of slate trigger. One was finding just a snare sound that complemented it that I liked, and this is that. And with both. And then I had a second instance that is just for room sound. And since I don't have trigger on here right now to show you, it was in an earlier version of the mix that I cleared out once I had bounced this. In trigger, you can adjust the attack, sustain, release, you know, the envelope of the hits. And I ramped up the attack a bit. so it was slower. So it's more of the tail, the room tail, and less of the initial crack. And then I've layered that with something called a snare bomb. And what did I do here? This, you know what I think I did here is, yeah, I took the same audio from up here, tossed it down on this track. So we're working with the same thing as this here. And without the, let me turn that crap off. Without the plugins, it's just that same snare sound. But what we've got are a few different things. First off, we have gate again. I think this is for the same reason as before. Oh no, we are using this because we want this to trigger a MIDI note every time it hits. So what regate is doing here is every time it opens, it's sending a MIDI note to channel 69, because that's what it picked apparently. And then I have Resamplematic here, which I've loaded in with a snare sample I've created a while back that sounds like this. So it's your, kind of modern metal snare. And then an instance of transgressor. In this case, we're taming the initial transient and more focusing on the sustain. Looks like we have a dead hit there, but whatever. So let's listen to just the snare bus. Probably help if I did this right. All right. So this is the initial snare by itself. And then once all of the processing and other layers are in place, it sounds like this. And then on the track itself, I'm running it, folder track, an instance of ProQ. This was just to do a few other things in context. You'll find yourself changing things, as you keep working on the mix. Even when a sound is done, you might be like, oh, now that I've got the leads where they need to be, this is, the sizzle is stepping on those too much or something. And then an instance of the SSL 9000 plugin channel strip. I like working with this. I don't do it all the time, but it has this little analog hissy low level that I like to it. Anyway, without this, and with. So all that's going on is some EQ here for the most part. And that is the snare sound. Now for the toms, we're going to go over these a little quickly. Same thing, we have an initial tom track. Let's beef this up a bit and unlock the take. Here we go. Here's an actual tom hit. Unlock this one. So this was the original tom sound from Adam. Quiet, we'll turn this up. And after I ran it through, once again, Drumgate, and then Tominator here is another bleed plugin. This helps pull cymbals out of toms. But I ran it through those two, and then we ended up with this guy, which is much cleaner then. And then we just have a bit of EQ on this guy. Once again, clearing out the low end, taming that first harmonic, clearing out some of the mids. And you'll note that this is going to be very similar to the other toms on here. Except this area, this is like 312 here, and here it's 368. This is going to change based on where that first harmonic is. But once you set one up, you can just toss it on the other tom mics and adjust it as needed. And we are layering the tom with a trigger, which sounds pretty similar. And together, those are like that. And we did that for each individual tom. I don't think there was anything else done on those. So the tom bus by itself without the rest of the tom folder processing sounds like this. And let's find another. That's the same fill. Good. And now on the folder track, open up. We have some more broadband EQ. This, just I wanted to give it a bit more beef and clear out a bit of the mids and give it a low pass. So without and with. And then we have some bus compression just to kind of even it all out. And an instance of decapitator. This is a setting I created called Sweetener, which is just a starting point for me to give it a bit of saturation without like really beefing the whole thing up too much. So here is without and with. Very subtle. And then I wanted a bit more low end to it, and I brought in a second instance or a second plugin to do that. I'm using Rare here, Analog Obsession. This is a Pultec emulation, and without and with, just more body. Now down to the overheads. First off, these are panned 68% right and 68% left. A fellow named Scott from Chernobyl Studios did a mixing stream recently, and he was talking about how to pan overheads and said he likes to pan them out just wide enough where they don't sound like they're starting to move behind your head. And I think that's a great way of articulating it, and that's what I did here. 68 seems good to me. So the overheads by themselves, and these are just the raw tracks from Adam right now, this is what they sound like. Turn this up a bit. Find some toms for you to add. There you go. So that's what they sound like. On each individual track, the left and the right, I started by clipping it because I wanted to tame the spiking that was happening during the shells. So without and with, it just kind of, you see how it's taking the snare and toms and kick and stuff and just reducing it a bit. And that's working in conjunction with the limiter to do the same. Just catching some of those higher notes. And then a quick little EQ pass. I'm high passing a lot of this out of here and removing some of this boxiness in the middle. So without and with. You get the idea. And we're doing almost the same, if not exactly the same thing on the right overhead. So without that processing, they sound like this. And with. And now on the overhead bus itself, first off, we're giving it some compression to hold it all together. And we're EQing it to increase the top end, but also notch out some grossness. And then we have an instance of Soothe 2, which I love. And this is here just to kind of smooth out the top end, kind of tame some of the harsher frequencies. So without and with. And if you hear what this is pulling out by itself, I mean, it's almost inaudible. It's not much, but it helps. And then I still wanted a bit more high end out of it, so we are using Fresh Air, which I don't always use. I think it's very easy to be way too heavy-handed with this, but we're using it here. So without, with, there we go. And we also have a knee mic. This is the Sylvia Massey classic crotch mic thing. And I really like it as a drum mic because it picks up a pretty even balance of all the different shells here. So this is just a mono track. And what I'm using this for is to kind of augment everything. This is what I'm using in... What did I just do? Okay. In lieu of setting up a parallel compression track. So first we're EQing it to pull out the ultra lows, the ultra highs, and some gross stuff here. And then I've got an upward expander here, and this is taking some of the... What are you doing exactly? Yeah, it's working as a compressor just to even things out a bit. Then we have a second round of EQing that I wanted to do once I, had heard this in context. So we're pulling out a lot of the mids. And then we're running Silencer by Black Salt Audio. And this is the one I thought I was talking about earlier. This helps with bleed. And what I've used it for here is to really just kind of focus on the shells. We want to not hear much of the overheads here. Then I'm leveling out those a bit. And then using Transgressor to reduce the sustain by about 5 dB. So it makes them real punchy. And then this was a bit more EQing in context of the rest of the mix, clearing out more low end, taming the mids a bit more, and giving a bit more crack on the high end. And then another instance of Soothe. This is in broadband mode, just to kind of clear out some stuff that, in general I wasn't liking. So these are all the drum mics in context now. Which I think sounds pretty friggin' great. And then what we do is I bus all of those kick, snare, toms, overheads, and knee mic to this auxiliary track to create a room because I didn't have a room mic. So all of the audio by itself on here is just the drum mix. We're starting by doing a bit of the Abbey Road trick for reverb rooms and stuff. We're clearing out the lows, the highs, and evening those out, and clearing out a frequency in the middle here I didn't like. And for reverb, I'm using TrueVerb. This is a Waves plugin. I don't use too many Waves plugins because I dislike them tremendously as a company, but TrueVerb is very nice and I still use this. So this is the room sound. And now that we have that all reverbed up, it's very low heavy, and so this is to help with that a bit. And then we're doing some SSL style compression here with Slate FG Gray. And so the drum mix by itself without the room sounds like this. And with. And then on the drum folder itself, drum bus, we've got some stuff going on. Move this over here. So first off, we're using standard clip. This helps catch, peaks from this thing. I do this mainly because I want to help myself out with mastering later. But you can see it's not doing a ton. We can see that in that segment, the loudest this hit was negative 10.76 dB full scale, and we've got this set to clip anything over 10. So really all it's there for are times, probably during tom fills and stuff, where it jumps above that. This just holds it in place. Then we're doing another sweetener-based version of Decapitator. This is without. And with. And I need to sneeze, excuse me. Oh, God, and as soon as you need to, it goes away. All right, screw it. We're not sneezing now. And then we're running another instance of the SSL 9000J plugin, and you'll notice this is all, pretty much all this shit is off. This is just adding a bit more of that THD noise sound. So without and with, almost inaudible. But this matters when we add it to a bunch of buses across the entire track. And then we're using Kramer master tape here to give it a bit of that tape sound. This is without. And with. That really is a pretty pronounced impact, especially in context. So that is the drum bus. Lovely. Let's move on to the Dan bus, because Dan's a great guy. Hell of a bass player too. Now you'll notice here I did something similar where I was processing stuff initially and then bouncing it to a second take so I could do further processing. In this case, with bass guitar, There's usually a lot I do on the front end just to kind of get everything to be even and, you know, set myself up for it to not be a nightmare. So the take unlock. This is the original bass track from Dan with nothing else. Pretty damn good DI bass sound. Now, some of this stuff to start is just to help myself with compression and all that. So first off, we're ducking some stuff at around 246 here. It's that kind of hollow howling sound. And then we also have an instance of RX spectral denoise. There was some line noise coming through that I didn't like, and this cleared it out. We can really hear it when the amp's on. Hear that whine? Hear it, listen to it between the notes here. And so this clears it out. Great. And then we have an instance of regate to help with some of the noise between all these staccato parts. You know what a gate sounds like. Then we're doing a bit more EQ just to prep it for the amp and clearing out a bit of low end and some frequencies in the middle. Oh, this is a dynamic low shelf, so we're controlling the low end a bit. Anyway, that's all the prep stuff. Now we're doing our compressor round to get us where we want it. First off, we're doing an 1175 just to catch the peaks. And you'll see it's not activating too much. Then we are using Analog Obsession Lala, which is an LA2A emulator, to even things out more. This is doing most of the evening out compression. And then declick because we were getting some clicks in here and I didn't want to manually edit them all out. So that is all the stuff we did initially, and then we bounced it to this track. I think I did this in a couple stages here, but this is what we ended up with. And now we are amping it. I'm using the Plugin Alliance Brainworks Ampeg SVT3 Pro because I really like it and I think it sounds good in almost every case. And this by itself is giving us most of our bass sound. God, it just sounds so fucking good. Then this is our main EQ. Just some general sculpting, and then in particular, this up here is taming some of the clackiness of the plucking, which was cutting through a bit more than I wanted, and in some places sounding like weird drum hits. Now we are really going to compress the living shit out of this. All this stuff up here was just to kind of even it out, but now we're going more aggressive. So this is just to get any possible notes that might jump up. The 1176, then another round of LA 2A here. This is more just generally evening it out. Decapitator, once again with the sweetener. Very subtle. And true verb. Now here is why I'm using true verb on a bass track. I like to place instruments in a room. And even if we have a DI bass or guitars that are running through amp sims that are DI, I like the slight sound of that cabinet mic'd being in a room. So this just simulates, hey, you have a 57 or what up in, actually I can tell you exactly what we have in this case. So you have a Dyne 600 and a ribbon mic up against your 4x10 cabinet, and it's in a room, so even though most of what the mic is picking up is the bass cab, you want to hear a bit of the room too. So here it is without. And with. Just adds a bit of liveliness to it. And the original version of the song is drenched in reverb, so There we go. We also have another instance of an SSL console. In this case, I'm using the 4000E, and I'm not doing anything except getting that THD stuff coming out of it. It's not that one, actually. It's somewhere else in here. And then we have Kramer tape to give it a bit of a tape sound. And that's the bass sound. So if we listen to just the bass and drums, sounding pretty good so far. All right, let's take a look at the wild and wacky world of rhythm guitars here. So all of the rhythm guitars are in a folder, and we have stuff on the folder that we'll get to in a bit, but let's turn off all of this stuff. And why don't we start with mine, because it is the least complicated. The only thing running on my rhythm guitar tracks is an instance of the Soldano SLO 100X amp sim by Neural DSP. And this is most of the sound right here. The only other thing is what's coming through on the rhythm guitar bus track. And what I was playing for rhythm here was actually just little augmenting stuff to flesh out those upper notes. So that's that. Ryan's guitars are similar, except we're running through a couple things. First off, we're doing Pro Q3. There were some gross frequencies that I wanted to cut out first, so before I ran it through Gojira in this case. So let's just hear it through Gojira without that EQ. Very small stuff, very mildly important. And then an instance of this just to give it a bit of that sound. So that's what those two sound like. And now we have Grant, who is a much more complicated process. Grant, I mixed another song for all of us with Grant's guitar recently and was very happy with that sound, so I used it here too, but he was using a different guitar and the pickup sounded a little different. So first, what we did with Grant's sound here is we ran it through an EQ matching plugin so I could match it to how his other guitar DI sounds. And what we're really doing here is running Grant through a few different things. For his heavy tone, we're running two different amps, left and right, and these are the same DI track. But first we're running it through an instance of the JST ToneForge Misha Mansour plugin, which I hardly ever use, but I liked it in this case. So the signal chain for the DI is first we're matching it to the other DI so I can use the same stuff. Then I wanted to clear out a bit of gross stuff I was still hearing, and then through ToneForge, and this is what Grant's ToneForge rhythm tracks sound like without any further processing. Just the matching, a bit of cleanup, and then ToneForge. And then we're doubling that and doing a similar thing with a different amp sim. We're gating this one because the I think the Misha one has a built-in noise gate. We're running this one through 808, TSE 808 overdrive. And once again, I think the ToneForge one just has one built in. And a bit of EQ to clean up stuff, and then through Neural Amp Modeler. This is a really cool amp sim where you can capture stuff, and it's free and too long to go over in this video, but I suggest looking into it. So this is what the second rhythm tone for Grant sounds like. And together. And you might notice I have the polarity inverted on this one. Even though these DIs are the same, after the processing, it was sounding weird without it. There we go. And now for each one, I have a little bit of extra processing for the ToneForge stuff. Once again, high cut or high pass, low pass, and clearing up some grossness. And then for This one, we were doing something else with this here. I can't recall what it was. A lot of different little EQ instances. This is shaping. This is beefing up the low end to give it a bit more thud during palm muted segments. This is to tame that a bit. I matched it with something else and I can't recall why. And then this was the final one I was doing in context. Anyway, without all that stuff on both rhythm guitars, it sounds like this. And with so that's pretty much the rhythm guitars, heavy rhythm guitars for Grant. We also have a lot of clean stuff from Grant, and with these, I don't think I used an amp sim. Grant sent me a few through an amp that he used himself. So we have this guy, and then doubled with a bit of echo. And for processing on this guy, we're not doing a ton. We're running it through an instance of Pro Q3 just to clean it up a bit, and True Verb. So that's all of Grant's rhythm stuff. And on the folder track, we have an instance of Rare here just because I wanted to give it all a bit more low end. And then once again, this guy just for the THD goodness. So Grant's rhythm stuff without that. And with. So that's that. And now on the rhythm track itself, these are a few things. Well, we got a number of things going on here. We're starting with Pro MB, and this is to just even out, it's a multi-band compressor. This is to even out things that might happen across the song as we have different amounts of rhythm tracks playing at any given time. Because as you can see, sometimes it's just Grant's cleaner stuff, sometimes it's everything, you know, sometimes it's everything except for my augments, and the multi-band compressor here just keeps it from getting too nuts at any point, especially during those palm mutes. Then we have our guitar cab room. Let me go back somewhere where it's easier to hear. And a gain utility, this is just an easy way for me to add 2 dB of gain without screwing up, you know, my envelopes for volume or trim. Then this is the main EQ. I think, no, I didn't even do much here. This, in context of the song, just adding a bit more weight to around 140. Bus sweetener with decapitator. And a lot of these things are really subtle, but they add up to a lot. Same thing with the console here, no EQ. We're just doing the THD stuff and an instance of tape. Off and now on. And Pro C2 here, just once again to control the overall signal level a bit. You can see it's doing like less than 1.5 decibels in gain reduction. So listening with all those, sounding pretty much like the song. All right, let's get into the leads here. Leads are interesting, and I'm gonna show you why. Let's look at, what do we want to do first here? Well, let's look at Grant's stuff because his was the most straightforward because I don't think I did any reamping with him. If I'm not mistaken, all of Grant's stuff, yeah, it's just tracks he sent. So, what are his leads? He did all of the clean leads during the, you know, the verses, and then he does that little descending, I think it's Phrygian dominant or something riff at the end. But these are all of his little riffs throughout. And he sent me a few tracks. We have the main one here. one with some effects, and panned a bit differently. And this one. So that's the room. So combined, they sound like this. It's kind of a panned slapback. And if we look at each one of these, we're really just, what did I even do here? I didn't do anything with this. I think I just put this on here because I planned on using it. We have a gate to clean up some stuff. And then for the second one, just EQing just to get the mid-range of this guy, and then some reverb, so this by itself. And with that stuff. And then for the third one here, we just EQ'd it. So before and with. And then why are you not doing stuff repair? Here we go. All of those are in a riffs folder, and we started with just some EQing. This is, in the context of the song. The stuff on here is more about cleanup, and the stuff on here is song context. So that's what that's doing. We have a round of bus compression. And you can see it's very subtle. It's just taming it a bit. And then replica here. This is my favorite-ish delay plugin, and this is what I'm using to give it the sound. One thing I'll draw your attention to is the fact that we have a low cut or high pass and high cut or low pass set pretty aggressively. So the echoes themselves don't have as much low end or high end. And then just a bit of further EQ in context. And where this came from is the vocals. Since this is playing during the verses with the vocals, these are areas where they were kind of stepping on the vocals a bit, and I didn't want that. And we have another 3 tracks that are processed exactly the same, because this is a harmony line during this part here. Let's just play the first part. And then these guys. So an octave. And I think that's a third there. And this is where some of this compression really comes in, when we have twice as many lines. And then we have Grant's surf stuff. What's in the surf folder? Oh, this is the stuff he's playing during the during the choruses. And this second track, all this is a double. And so we've got the double processed with some widener. And then the whole thing on it just has some EQ. And then all of Grant's stuff is through the Grant folder, and all I did here was a bit of EQ to make it fit a bit better in context of the song. So that's all Grant's stuff. Now let's look at Ryan's and mine, because I'm doing something a little interesting here. I can't remember where I learned this trick, but you're going to learn about it right now. This is a specific folder setup that I use to get a kind of a phase-enhanced or polarity-enhanced stereo-ish guitar sound out of a single DI track. So let's look at what's going on here. We have the DI, and this is not going to the master bus or parent send. This is just capturing the DI. And I have any, preamp effects I want here. In this case, it's a phaser, but let's turn that off for now. And this is a child track, which just allows me to have a second track to go up without doing funky editing and stuff. Now, all of this runs into these 2 folders called Receive 1 and Receive 2. And these are panned hard left and hard right. And one has an effect on it called Flipper. And all this does is flip the polarity. And then these go through an amp sim. So without listening to the amp sim... Or actually, we can't do that. We'll have to listen here. probably help if I solo it. So the only reason we're doing this with hard left, hard right, flipping the polarity on one, is because I'm running these two into a folder track with a stereo amp sim, once again Soldano. And what this means is it's taking the same track in twice, one on the left-hand side and one on the right-hand side, but the right-hand side is polarity flipped. So when we listen to this, here, when we don't flip it, it's just mono because we have a hard left and a hard right of the same signal, which means that it's just that signal in mono. But when we invert the polarity, since we have them going through two different sides and one is slightly different, it's processing them both differently. And then what happens is I run this out to these two tracks, left and right. By the way, this guy is not going through the master either. Then this is final audio. So what happens is it comes into left and right, and these aren't panned at all because they were already panned on their way in. And this has another polarity flipper on it, and then whatever other effects I'm using. So if we remove the polarity flipping on both of these, not that, this. It sounds like that. And then when we flip them again, where'd you go? Oh, wait, we had to turn that one off. It gives us this cool little like centralized lead signal, but it has some stereo spread to it. And then I just run all of that up through this folder track for whatever final processing. So once again, we have a folder with everything. We have the DI track, which doesn't go to the master, but feeds the left and right that feed into an amp sim, stereo amp sim, which once again doesn't go to the master, but goes down to left and right here where we flip the phase back and do final processing. And in this case, final processing is the room sound and then just a bit of gain adjustment. So without the room sound, once again, subtle reverb just to simulate a guitar cab in a room and a boost. Volume boost, rather. We'll turn the flanger back on at the DI stage. And then final processing for the track here was just a slight high-pass filter. And we are doing a very similar thing with Ryan's leads here. Let's make this by itself. So we have the DI coming in. I didn't even have a second one there. Then amp processing, we're running him through the Neural DSP Mesa Boogie Mark II C+. And same thing, stereo coming in with a phase inversion on the right-hand track. Those are both going through here where it gets phase inverted again, and then with final processing, which in this case, we did some delay. This is just a slapback delay, then actual delay, and then we put a bit more reverb on his too. So his sounds like this. And then on the main folder track for that itself, we did a bit of EQ to clean it up. Clear out some of those lows. Then we have this again just for the analog snake oil, and then an instance of true verb. And this is adding just a bit more room, and then a gain utility. And the only other leads stuff we have is the staccato segment, and this I did much more straightforward. Since it's not going to be center, I didn't want to worry about, that slight stereo enhancement. So we have me, we have Ryan, both DIs, both going up through a stereo instance of Soldano. And there are the settings if you want to see them. all pretty straightforward. And then Pro Q just to clean it up a bit. Like so forth. And now on the whole leads track, we have a few other things, just another sweetening instance of Decapitator, more of this analog snake oil, and then Kramer here. And that'll actually change the sound a bit. So let's listen to something with some real leads. Here we go. Just kind of grits it up a bit. All right, so we now have gone over the drums, the bass, the rhythm guitars, the lead guitars. That's sounding pretty good. Now we have a track here with miscellaneous stuff. This is nothing really too interesting, but this is that scratch guitar sound that you hear throughout it. This is just me playing DI and then doing a bunch of processing to get it to sound how I wanted it to, but it's not worth going over. And then Simon the cat, Simon Belmont the cat. This cat Ryan's cat walked into his room when he was recording vocals and just did that, and he decided to keep it, and we have it in the song right after the "About Your Darling Doggy" line. What about your darling doggy? As a fun little Easter egg. All right, so let's look at the vocals. First off, we're not going to go to the vocal bus. We're going to go to the vocal processing here, because this is where a bunch of stuff happens first. And we could go through these. There are places where I've done individual, gain clip adjustments. There was a lot of little cleanup stuff. But the main thing is removing mouth clicks, an initial EQ pass just to pull out any low-end stuff that might screw up the compressors, and then an 1175 to help with any peaks, and then Pro C2 just to even out the whole thing. And I think that's pretty standard for all of these. Some have less. But the thing is, I didn't want to be running all that stuff in real time when I was mixing it, so I ran all of these, rendered them to new tracks, which are up here. And also you'll see there's a little, volume automation. So we will close that out and look at the actual vocals now. We've got a lot of tracks here. All right. So the vocal bus itself, let's turn all of these effects off. All right. So first off, we have a couple of auxiliary tracks here, verb and delay, that we're running a lot of this stuff through. I'm not going to talk about those first. Let's look at the mains. So we have the verse vocals and then the chorus vocals. We'll close all this gang and miasma stuff. All right. So for Ryan and his main vocals, now mind you, these have already been processed through that initial high pass 1176 and declicker and stuff. All right, so let's look at just the verse here.
You worry too much. You make yourself sad. You can't change fate, but don't feel so bad.
So these little, additional things are on a secondary track feeding into this main one because they're processed the same. So looking at this, first we have soothe. This is evening out some of the S sounds.
Change fate, but don't feel so bad. Enjoy it while you can. It's just like the weather. So quick.
Then we have the main EQing with Pro Q3.
Change fate, but don't feel so bad. Enjoy it while you can. It's just like.
And now we're doing actual vocal compression.
Change fate, but don't feel so bad. Enjoy it while you can.
Let's find somewhere where it's a bit more pronounced.
Got so many tricks, no one lives. Don't forget we've only got so many tricks.
Yeah, there are a couple places where it spikes up, and that's just to catch those. And then for my main vocal compression, I'm using TDR Katonikov, which is great because you can do peaks and RMS at the same time, and this thing just sounds great. So without...
Me, I'm as clever as can be. I'm very quick, but don't forget we've only got so many tricks. No one lives forever.
It's just killer. And then those run up through the mains folder, which has some stuff on them, but we'll get to that in a bit. For the chorus, the chorus stuff is stacked. We have a bunch of stuff here.
Have a party, there's a full moon in the sky. It's the hour of the wolf, and I don't wanna die.
So let's look what's on here. It might just be the same stuff with the settings tweaked a bit. Soothe to clean up the S's and T's.
Have a party, there's a full moon in the sky. It's the hour of the wolf, and I
EQ.
have a party, there's a full moon in the sky. It's the hour of the wolf, and I don't wanna
1175 to catch the peaks, and then to Kotelnikov here.
have a party, there's a full moon in the sky. It's the hour of the wolf, and I don't wanna die.
And those are really nice, the compressor, Kotelnikov in particular, because once again, we have different numbers of tracks at different points, so that just helps even things out, even though there is automation going on through some of this stuff throughout. And all that stuff gets sent to this mains folder, and on here, Pro Q3, just to do a bit more evening out.
Don't wanna die.
Come on, sing.
I'm so happy, dancing while the grim reaper.
So we're taming some of the sibilance and upper harshness, and then this is a dynamic EQ around 330 just to keep the mud from building up too much at places. Then another instance of Soothe 2 to help with some sibilant stuff.
I'm so happy, dancing can't get.
And then Mag here, I wanted to add some air to it. This is another EQ plugin. I know I'm using a ton of different EQs in here, but I like the way this handles upper end sometimes. So this is without.
I'm so happy, dancing while the grim reaper cuts, but he can't. I'm so happy, dancing while the grim reaper cuts, but he can't get me.
And the thing is, like, the vocal recordings had some harshness at the top. So really what this stuff is mostly about is cleaning that up. And then now that it's a bit more even in the top end, boosting the whole thing. And that all comes up through the vocal bus here, which has just some slight EQ to help it more as I continued mixing it. We got a dynamic EQ around 540, lowering stuff, some mid boosts, and then some more to help with S sounds here. Solid EQ I like for broadband stuff sometimes. Looks like I did just a slight reduction in the high end, half a decibel. That might have just been me accidentally clicking on it. And then adding a bit more body around 630 hertz. Then Decapitator, just to sweeten it a bit, and the console plugin. So without all that stuff.
I'm so happy, dancing while the grim reaper cuts.
And with.
I'm so happy, dancing while the grim reaper cuts, but he can't get me.
Now, there's actually something else in here. These are running through a delay aux, and this is just getting de-essed and then run through replica with, once again, some fairly aggressive high and low cuts, and this just adds some basic echo on all of the vocals.
I'm so happy, dancing while the grim reaper cuts, but he can't get me. I'm as clever as can be. I'm very quick, but don't forget we've only got so many tricks. No one lives forever.
And one of the things I really like about Replica is that built in you have ducking. So what it'll do is when the main signal is coming in, it'll reduce the level of the echo so it's not stepping over things.
Got so many tricks, no one lives forever.
And we are also running through a similar setup just to give it some reverb. And the reverb, we're cleaning up the frequency range that we want to come through. We're heavily de-essing it because S's through reverb sound rough. Then we are compressing the whole thing to keep it a bit more even, running it through Valhalla plate, and the signal by itself sounds like this. And then, if we want to listen to those vocals without those two auxiliaries, sounds like this.
I'm so happy, dancing while the grim reaper cuts, but.
And with.
I'm so happy, dancing while the grim reaper cuts, but he can't get me. I'm as clever as.
So it adds a lot. Now, we have all the gang vocals here. We have stuff from Ryan, we have stuff from me, and stuff from Grant. And there's a lot. This is a song with a lot of little gang additions.
Hey! Hey!
You know, stuff like that, as well as...
No one lives forever! Better that you had some fun!
So these are leveled and panned just to fill everything out. All of Grant's stuff... Ooh, I didn't want to turn all that on. I just want to turn that on. Grant's stuff here. Cleared out the low end. This is just compress it and keep it together and then de-ess it. So before...
Better that you had some fun!
And after...
Better that you had some fun!
Similar thing with mine, which sound terrible. But before...
Better that you had some fun!
And with...
Better that you had some fun!
And then all of those get run through the folder track here, which has most of what's going on. So we're cleaning up the top end. We're doing general EQ. So without those together...
Better that you had some fun!
And with...
Better that you had some fun!
Multi-band compression, because we have all sorts of different stuff across this.
Better that you had some fun!
More compression.
Better that you had some fun!
More compression.
Better that you had some fun!
The goal is I wanted to keep these all sounding really tight and together, but not so much so that any one compressor was going to be working too heavily and making it sound odd. Now we're doing a bit more EQing here. Once again, this was in context.
Better that you had some fun!
And we have some dynamic stuff in the middle, and then some additional reverb, because for backing vocals, I like to make them sound a bit farther away.
Better that you had some fun!
And so the whole reverb, the whole vocal bus so far is this.
Man, when it's all been said and done, better that you had some fun. Instead of hiding in a shell, I make you... No one lives forever!
And you will see that there is automation going on here. The volume is changing throughout as appropriate. You know, there are parts where I wanted Ryan to not be as prominent and the gang stuff to be more prominent. So that's what all that is. And the last group of vocals that we have are these miasma ones. And this is all the crazy drifty stuff that we have going on. So during the initial one, it's this. And this here is just a slight instance of retune to clean up a couple of the pitches here. And those are all running through a few things. First off, this is a fun one. This is M Auto Pan. And I have this set to 55%, so it's not going fully deep, and I have it set to only 28% wet. So if I set this all the way up, hear it bouncing around. But with it only sort of wet, it creates this sense where you still hear it in the middle, but it still sounds like it's floating around. Then we have Soothe to clean it up. We have Pro Q3 to reduce a lot of the highs and lows and stuff, because we don't want this really, it wants to sound distant. And some multi-band compression just to kind of keep it evened out so nothing builds up. Proceed to even it out. And then Replica and Valhalla. And I'm using separate instances of these instead of those auxiliary tracks because these are far more heavily affected. Once again, they're supposed to sound spacey and dreamy and distant and not nearly as upfront as the main vocals. And I automate it so all that shit dies right as they stop, because in the context of the song, we don't want that all, you know, bleeding through. Like, for example, if I were to bypass this, I don't want that trailing tail. So those are all of the main categories. And there's just a couple other things to talk about. I know this video is long. Good God, it's long. First off, let's talk about automation. Automation is key to getting a good mix. Setting up a static mix is wonderful, but automation is what adds that extra little bit that is somehow way more important than it seems. And we're doing all sorts of stuff here. Just some examples. On the drum bus here, during the intro, we're upping the volume by a decibel during the big hits. Also, during the interlude segment, we've turned the whole thing down a bit. And even more so during the quiet parts. The drum room. We are automating how much drum room is in the mix. During the heavier parts, there's more. During the quieter parts, there's less. Just helps it feel more intense as it's happening. Looking through the kick drum, we have little 1.8 dB boosts during starts of segments, places where I thought the kick should be more pronounced.
No one lives forever. Let's have a party, there's a full moon.
We'll just do this by itself. Just a little bit of a boost there. With the snare, we're doing similar things. This was just here to help with the trigger. But, you know, snares louder during the intro, during some of the hits. Like, that's supposed to sound like a cannon, so I didn't want it the normal volume. And same thing with the big hit at the end of this. And then leading up to coming back in. So there's that. For the toms, I didn't do anything on this, and that's odd. I usually do a certain amount on the toms. Maybe I should have. Who knows? Let's look at the overheads. So what we're doing, do I have the... In fact, I thought there was one more going on. There we go. Width. So I set the width, you know, based on the panning here. This is what it is. But I don't keep that overall width of the folder at 100 the whole time. During some parts, I bring it down to 80, and the real quiet parts down to 60. And that just means that when it blossoms back out to a full 100%, you know, established by these limits here, it feels wider. So when you get to segments like choruses and it bumps back up to 100, it feels bigger. Same thing with little volume automation here. I'm not really changing the overall level of the cymbals so much, but I'm augmenting certain hits at the start of sections and stuff like that. What are we doing with the knee mic? No automation on the knee mic. On the bass, it's a little louder during the intro. Little quieter during, oh, this is the fill. Like that. Looking at rhythm guitars, I think we have a few things going on. This is the trim, which is a secondary volume. I dropped this part down just a bit. Why did I do that? Oh, yeah. Because this exists kind of outside of the rest of the song. But, you know, my rhythm stuff is going up when they switch to the chugging parts of the chorus because I needed this to stand out more. Grant's syncopated stuff and little augments during the intro are a bit louder because there's less things for them to compete with and they draw more focus. Like that. So forth. And what do we do with the leads? I don't think a ton. We did some panning stuff, like Grant's little riff here. Not a ton. And then here, a lot of stuff towards the end, because when the end of the song is happening, we have all these extra vocal layers and we have two different lead lines going on. we have this. Where am I looking? I'm looking at the wrong place. Here we go. Because it starts doing this stuff. And, you know, if you kept all that stuff as you had it set for other segments, it wouldn't necessarily work in the later segments. And vocals are a lot of automation. It's just controlling little amounts of the wet on the delays for different places, bumping up volumes for the backing stuff as needed, and adjusting the leads as accordingly, not as accordingly. And then lastly, we have the aux tracks up here. And these are little things that just kind of help the mix in small ways. So first, let's look at the glue comp. This is a track that is getting everything. The drum bus, Dan, all rhythm guitars, all leads, the miscellaneous stuff like the cat, and vocals. And we are just trimming out a lot of the low end that we don't want and then compressing it to give it a bit more punch. It doesn't sound good on its own, but when it's mixed in with the rest of the song, you really hear it. So for example, let's just go to the chorus here, and we are listening just to this glue compression track. You see the meter jump in there. So in the context of the song, if we turn this off, yes, some of it is just that it's louder and that is perceived as better. But the other thing is that it's helping fill in the gaps between hits. It's making it punchier and just having the whole thing kind of groove a bit. And then we have a glue reverb, which is a similar thing. This is getting, what are you getting? Everything. Drum bus, Dan, rhythm guitars, lead guitars, Vox bus. This isn't getting the miscellaneous stuff, but it doesn't matter too terribly much. So once again, we're doing kind of the Abbey Road thing where we're trimming off the lows and highs, and I ducked a few specific frequencies that were sounding ugly when mixed in with the rest of the mix. We're using true verb, and we have the direct signal turned off, so all we're getting are the early reflections and reverb, and then we're cleaning that up more as needed in the mix. So by itself, it sounds like this. And if I turn that off and then turn it on, here's what it does to the mix. Hard to hear, but let's go somewhere where it'll stand out a bit more. Just small little stuff that helps put it all together in a room. And that's it. I think that's it. Once again, we kind of flew over everything, and I didn't go into much detail about, specific bands on EQs and how I set compression settings and stuff. But this is what the mix looks like. This is what most of my mixes look like in some capacity. And this is a great springboard for discussion. So if you have any questions, just let me know in the comments. I will try to address them. And until next time, keep the world metal.